This is the point where I say we've got a lot of new people on the call. So George will give you a quick introduction and to put the meeting in context.
Okay, right. So just before we dive into the detail of this, I just wanted to explain why we're doing it. So about a year ago, the team looked at what was being required of the golden thread and started to try and identify what are the key things that go wrong that we could try and address. So one of them was, how do we make sure that the right product is being selected? So you'll see here, this was an event that we held at Digital Construction Week last May. And we had a team of people looking at that. And we ran that session this morning. We then looked at another question here was incomplete building services design, in other words, contractor design portion, and what the impact is, for example, on compartmentation. We then had the asset information, so being able to ensure that we can track the asset right the way through its life. So we had that session this afternoon rather, and now we're on this one. Okay, so the principle of this is to say that the building safety case isn't just a snapshot in time. It's actually part of a building management system, which is an ongoing thing that then needs to reflect the current change. And at that time, Ed, you were at Clarion. So then what we've then done, we had, this is these are the people we've had. Let me just see. We've had 146 people contribute to this over the last year. So we've run quite a few sessions, and so you're all in illustrious company. In fact, some of you probably are listed on there as well already because you've already contributed. And just to show you what we're actually going to be producing, we've got 4 documents like this, but this is the building safety data one. So this is what we're going to be issuing to Deluxe. So what you're contributing to here today, this is what's going to happen with it. Okay, over to you, Richard.
Great. So there's, as I said in the other meetings, there's going to be a level of repetition because these documents are all standalone. They're not. This is kind of hopefully about the last phase before we actually put it out for peer review. But these these things are never finished. They're always dynamic. Things change. Regulations change, guidance changes, but and this is the last meeting on it, so I'm just so happy. We've had 3 great meetings today and got a lot of input for me to coordinate and write up. So now you're going to give me some more, and I know it's going to be the best meeting of the day. Jess, would you put the question up, please, in the document? How do we ensure that the building safety data is live, not an outdated snapshot in time? Okay, so change management process. A robust change management process should be followed throughout the entire project. This ensures that any alterations or updates to building safety information are systematically managed and documented. Okay, who's going to kick me off on that one?
Does anybody question it? Because I think that's a statement, Richard. I think that yeah.
Well, yeah, but what does it mean? What does it consist of? What is the change management process going to be? How are we going to do that?
Jarek?
There's something missing here, isn't there? Because asset managers are constantly managing change. This really doesn't say it's the link between the physical changes and the information record that matters.
That's true.
Can I jump in?
Yes, you certainly can. You've got your hand up.
So there'll be two different aspects, and they will need to be approached differently. The project delivery will have a different process, and then the asset management during operational phase, because of the frequency type of events and so on.
And they are.
And also, I think this part of all our today's discussion is the one where the technology can actually help a lot. Because, for example, companies like BuildDots, where you can automatically capture the progress on site, which will then automatically compare that with design information and flag up the issues. That is quite a good process, and it's already working and being used not as a test, but actually as a production. So yeah, I think that's where the technology can actually really help us.
Excellent, excellent. Nick?
Yeah, I mean, it says entire project, and we need to expand that also to consider, I always put the word program alongside project, so capital projects and asset management programs. And it's that continuity between both the project and the program phases that actually is a robust change management process.
Okay, good. Anyone else on that? This is good. We're expanding this out, which is what we want to be doing.
I think the
Ed.
critical thing here is, sorry.
Ed?
Hi there. Yeah, I just want to make a distinction. Some of the wordings is slightly suggesting something reactive, where change management in my mind is a proactive process of identifying where change is going to happen and then how we're going to manage it to ensure that, in this case, the safety aspects are managed properly. So we say, okay, we're going to change the cladding on the building, what are the risks whilst we do the works, but also what's the desired outcome and how we're going to minimize any undesirable impacts. So it's that proactive aspect that I think we need to bring to the fore, and maybe that's a habit that needs to be encouraged in our sector.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point. Richard?
You're on mute, Richard.
Apologies. Sorry, guys. Now, I'm guessing in this particular instance, or for this particular question, the project that you're talking about is actually the full life duration of a building, as opposed to a particular instance. So where lots of people talk about change management over the duration of a project, i.e. a construction period, it probably needs making clear that project in this instance is talking about 30, 35 years, not 2 years of a construction project.
Absolutely. It's the building safety data for the life of the building.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It probably needs something, because lots of people consider the word project to be about a short period of time where an element of work takes place, as opposed to the full duration life of a building.
Yeah, the word project is completely wrong and totally misleading. Yeah, very, very good. Thank you. Jonathan?
All right, thank you. I think, although sorry, I'm probably a bit late, to this, but one question I probably would see here is we're talking about the building safety data and keeping this live and managing change, throughout the, the entire project. I think it raises the question of ownership. Which data are we changing at which point? Nick mentioned already, aligned with the program. Who has that responsibility to change, and what are they changing? Because again, in line with the golden thread, all of such changes needs to be captured one way or the other. So it's a question of it talks about a process. So it's kind of defining exclusively, how that process is being defined and implemented.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know if I'm making sense, but you
No,
know,
Yeah,
you are. Well, I think I understand you. Anybody want to come back on that one?
Yeah, I would say that there will be a range of different projects which are being carried out. Let's say in a hospital, for example, you've got a steady state situation where you've got things that are in and operating and etc. for on a normal basis that you need to monitor and make sure that those elements and assets and systems are still functioning. But then you've got maybe refurbishments or additional works or things like that, which are project based. So they're mini projects perhaps within the overall scheme. And you need to record what's going to be changed, as somebody was saying earlier, I think Ed was saying earlier, and also then what has been changed, so that we end up with a set of asset information that reflects the complete current status.
Ed?
Yeah, as I say, we need to, in a sense, we all want robust change management, but we need to define what does that mean. You know, this needs to be expanded in a set of principles that say this is what robust change management looks like. You know, it's proactive, it defines responsibilities, so on and so forth. What we might want to have in place in terms of mechanisms, so people can grasp actually what we mean here.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm happy if we can do some of that in this meeting.
Yeah.
Heidi,
The first one, like it starts with an accurate set of data in the first place.
Heidi,
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, I was just going to
welcome.
say thank you very much. I'll put my two
Where are you
pence
from,
worth in.
Heidi?
I'm originally from Suffolk, but I'm talking to
No,
you
no,
near Manchester.
I remember what organisation.
Anchor
Anchor,
Housing.
sorry, sorry,
I said,
you said that
yeah.
earlier. I beg your pardon.
Well, I was just going to come in because at Anchor we have this sort of scenario where I'm trying to get my head around how on earth I'm going to manage some of this, because we have a lot of care, extra care. We have homeowners, very different sorts of housing. We have vulnerable residents, etc. And one thing that's causing a lot of concern for me is whereby I have no control over what work's being done, so on a local level, and it's usually the cabling, say for telephony or whatever, where we then get breaches of compartmentalisation. So I don't have the answer, but for me, it would be a brilliant use of BIM, but how you manage that with non-technical people, I'm sure there are examples out there, but that's my thought is how do you keep control of that information process when some people may cut corners, etc. And I know you can't allow for human error all the time, but it's how you can roll that out and make it easy for people to update systems, etc.
Absolutely, and be aware when the human has made the error.
Yes, yeah.
Nick?
Sorry to bang on about this one sentence, two sentences, but you know, the idea that there is something called building safety information is really, it's not useful. You know, there is asset information and a few other bits and pieces like management information, which is connected to safety risks. And the only thing that makes a piece of information safety information rather than just ordinary asset information is that connection to a risk.
I agree.
So the the important thing is to have an asset management system which is connected with the risk register, so that you can pull out the things that have got some connection to managing the risk of collapse, safety failings, fire, etc., etc.
I fundamentally agree with Nick.
Well, you got the question, mate. So
No, I fundamentally agree with him, and the important thing about that is that the asset information that the building safety team needs is the same asset information that lots of other people need.
Yes.
And if you differentiate it and say that asset information is to be managed by the building safety team, you end up with a silo. So when somebody comes along and does a replacement, maybe part of a reactive maintenance call, that replacement is made in the CAFM system, perhaps, and it doesn't get filtered back up into the building safety team. So absolutely agree with what Nick said.
Okay, so we're saying that we shouldn't be using the term building safety data because it doesn't exist.
No, building safety data is fine. The point is, as Nick's saying, it's actually it's information that's informing the building safety use of the information, but it's not asset data in itself.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Edward, Ed.
I mean, Chris Lees and I did a.
Oh, sorry, Shakira, sorry.
Hi, thank you. I kind of, well, I agree with your point, Nick and George. I wanted to kind of go back to Jonathan's point with regards to, I'd say kind of ownership, but also if we're talking about the sort of change management process, by oversimplifying, let's just say with the whole kind of life cycle and portfolio approach to this, we want to make sure, for instance, that there is a sponsor, whether we're kind of calling them the owner that's sort of leading the change management and sort of handover of information from each of those various parties. So whether it's for, you know, the asset management bit or it's for the construction phase, etc., if that's actually led and kind of owned by a, you know, a key sponsor, then hopefully I think we can eliminate some of the silos. But also when it comes to how we tag the information, whether it's to do with building safety or whatever other element, we have a bit more transparency across the sort of asset information, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. Ed.
Yeah, it's just on the same subject. I mean, a lot of this depends on what lens you're looking through. So as an asset manager, this would be asset information. Me as a sort of building safety person, the asset information could be building safety data, but also the management arrangements, information about people is building safety data. So I mean, it's good to make that distinction and also make it clear it depends on what point of view you're taking. And of course, a lot of asset information won't be of interest to me, to be quite frank. You know, I'm not that concerned about the color of the door, other than it helps me identify it.
Yeah.
But actually, I want to know how it performs in a fire and when it should be maintained.
Yeah, it just. I mean, yeah, in the thing that Chris Lees and I wrote, we made a three-way distinction between spatial information and zones, physical fabric and systems, and process information. And of course, you don't want to store information about individuals if you can help it, but you can certainly characterize them with as groups or roles or whatever. But I think there is a way of structuring asset information and management information where you can maintain the links between them. But it's the risk register, and in particular the safety risk register. Other risk registers are available, that actually makes it relevant. So if there is a risk of disabled residents not being able to escape successfully, then yes, that will have a pointer to that activity of helping that class of people to escape. So it's a process thing. But I think well, I'm just offering that three-way split, which is then pointed to by the risk register, saying this risk is associated with these things, and any change to those things.
Could you share that, Nick?
It's in the link already.
Great, thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, Jarek.
Yeah, I like what Nick said about linking the building safety into the risk management, and that made me think about, again, it's a multifaceted, maybe I'm stating the obvious, but it's a complex situation because you will have a different risk during different, if we consider the whole life cycle of a building, let's say. So during its delivery, you will have construction risks, you will have design risks, you will have business risks, which you need to consider during the design, during installation, and during operation. You will have clinical risk. If that's a hospital, that will also then have impact on the requirements. It's a very complex situation, but I like the connection between the risks, but there is a lot different types of risks, different type of projects, and different stages of a life cycle.
Excuse me, Richard. You're on mute, Richard.
Right. Sort of 2 points. One, accepting that there's different stages of life, and so things are going to represent a risk at some point, not at others, etc. What was just being said. The NRM3 table kind of sets out a set of what would be considered different elements of a building for where you can sort of call in risk or not. But Heidi, you asked the question earlier and said, how do you manage the works, i.e. data cablers are world renowned for throwing cables in all over the place, not telling anyone where to put a hole, etc. The only way to manage it, and it needs people being particularly strict, is with a permit to work system or a permit to access system, where at the end of any given day, when you're signing a permit off, people literally walk you the route that they have installed cables and prove to you that they haven't or otherwise done any damage, so that you can keep it in a record and get it repaired after. The trouble
Totally agree
is,
with that, Richard.
if you've got lots of housing projects, it sounds like yours lot is a housing project. I don't know the company, sorry. But it sounds like if you're doing housing projects, is how do you manage that when any given cable puller might have been in 20 buildings in one day?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
they're in, out, don't want to sign permits and want to do everything as quick as they can and get away. So managing that, I feel sorry for you having to try and manage that one. But the only way of doing it is with a really strict permit system.
Permit to work.
That's it.
And funny
enough, and funny enough, that's the way of tracking anything that happens in your building.
Yeah.
Because if every element of work that ever takes place in your building is attached to a permit to work, you've got one set of books, which is a record of everything that ever happened.
Yeah, I really like that idea, because obviously it's the same like when you do hot works, isn't it? But yeah, I think that's a really good idea.
That's a very interesting idea. The reason I kept repeating it is because I'm making sure that our transcriber lady picks it up. Heidi, you got your hand up.
Yeah, it's only just probably stating the obvious, but for me, another headache is around certification. So having automated certification, I think, is a must, but you need intelligent software that can check for errors. I'm really coming at it from...
Sorry, certification of what? Information?
Your compliance, so your gas,
Right.
your electrical, any of those, your top 6, whatever. And the reason I say that is because everybody, well, not everybody, sorry, certain people in the industry believe that just because you've got a piece of paper, you're actually compliant, whereas in fact we all know that you've got remedials that may be linked to that certificate, and that certificate could actually be unsatisfactory. And I've got a lot of experience of that. So there is software out there that can not only do you have the certificate uploaded automatically, which obviously reduces time, but it can also reduce error because it's intelligent software that can check for the errors on the actual certificate as well. And then third-party audits will always help with that as well. It's one of those where you ask for a pack of information, you start sifting through it, and you'll find that it's non-compliant because the remedials haven't been done. Hope that makes sense.
No, absolutely. Yeah, we're aware of those packages. They're good, aren't they?
Yes. Yes, I'm trying to get them at the moment. So, yeah.
Okay, anyone else on change management? Okay, so we'll scroll down a bit, Jess.
Oh.
I think the key thing is, I think we're agreed that what we need is a baseline of what's gone into the building, and those to be unique assets, harking back to what we did in the earlier session, that then can carry that that information and then be related, as Nick's saying earlier, to particular risks. And it's also the connection of spaces and people and activities, which are all elements that need that connected asset information.
Okay, so we looked at moving away from PDFs in the last meeting. So I don't know if we need to actually go through that again. We can use what we've done already, I think. Define safety scope, consider changing focuses, record vital data for the future, cater to different user needs, and I think we've covered that. Interoperability, simplified information products, and efficient data curation. Any thoughts on that? I think that we have had a little bit of discussion around interoperability, haven't we?
I think the key thing is making sure that the information about those different assets, systems, spaces, people, etc., is in a standardized format that therefore is machine readable, and we can then start to use that to run scenarios, for example.
Let me ask a general question to everyone. Is there anybody here who thinks that this data doesn't need to be machine readable? Is there anyone?
Well, some of the
Richard?
information will be in the form of documents, Richard. That's the thing. So I think the critical thing is that the asset information itself, the asset ID and the information about what type of element that is,
And its
also
attributes.
and its attributes, that needs to be machine readable.
So that needs to be machine readable.
But you know, the data sheet to say what that particular product, you know, how it's going to perform and all that sort of stuff at the moment is typically delivered as documents.
Sure, but I'm saying, does anybody think it doesn't need to be machine readable?
Are you saying is that desirable?
Yeah.
When you say it doesn't need to be, it isn't at the moment.
Well,
and
that
it
doesn't
may
mean
not
it doesn't
be.
need to be.
Yeah. It ideally it should be, definitely.
Right, okay. Is there anybody who disagrees with that?
Nick's
Okay,
got
Nick.
his hand up.
The word
Yeah, I can
need
see that,
might
George,
be a
thank
bit
you.
strong, but I think it would be it's probably beneficial to have something that can be read by a machine. Whether it's a need or it would be beneficial, don't know. Not being, I'm out auditing all of the time. There's stuff that I'm told a machine has read and it's all been scanned and everything goes onto a spreadsheet somewhere having been scanned. And this is invariable. Every set of information I go through, I find where the machine has made mistakes. So, because if I'm reading an authorising engineer's report or whatever it is that's been scanned into somewhere, or a load of operating theatres that have all just been verified, I'm reading every line on it, not just numbers.
Yeah, is that
So
because it was
there's a bit
because
where
it was an OCR?
I think in all honesty, I'd like it to be able to go hand on heart. That's why there's issues, Richard. I really don't know. But reading a whole document rather than just a table of numbers tells me a story about what's going on in an operating theatre that a bit of AI being able to read a table of numbers doesn't.
Right, yeah.
So
sadly,
until AI gets smart enough that it can literally read the words that an authorising engineer, for example, is writing, or that a technician is writing when he writes a report on an air handling unit and says that something in particular is going on with bearings, but I've experienced this in the past, don't panic about it, because it might just be sort of some sort of background noise that someone's witnessed previously. It's very hard for AI to pick that up and quantify. So there's always going to be documents that's going to need a human. Would it be nice
Sure.
if you could scan everything in? Probably would, yeah.
Nick,
I'd like to offer a distinction between, I mean, yeah, data is invaluable for checking and applying filters and you know, all the things that we know that we can do with data. The reason we will still have documents is a thing called evidence. And as you say, certificates and sign-offs and photographs and blah, 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 blah. You know, their main role is as evidence, and they should be keyed to the data that's been extracted from them or associated to the data that they relate to. So that, yes, you can look at the data or the worksheet that tells you where to go and do stuff and what do you expect to see there, but it tells you, you know, the evidential documents that you might want to check or follow up on if there's any discrepancies. Now, the trouble is that as well as using documents as evidence, we also use them as data stores. And of course, the only way you can use data in a document is to get someone to read it. And if they're reading that, they're not reading the other 2,000 documents. So, you know, we need to give documents a role as supporting evidence. And as you say, if you're looking at some data and you don't believe it, or you think there's a spelling mistake or something's gone horribly wrong, then, you know, yes, you want to be able to say, well, where did this come from? But if not only AI, but rules, filters, reports, business intelligence, any of the things that we need to do serious management, we need data.
okay. Ed?
Yeah, I mean, just really following up on from what Richard and Nick said, I think it's clarity on defining what we need, always needs to be machine readable, and then the acceptance at the point of state of the art now, there's going to be aspects that possibly aren't going to be, and we need that human intervention. But let's state, okay, this is what we a baseline, we're always going to have this as machine readable. This is our standard. And then this is the recognition, there's bits we can't do, and making that really clear, because I think we're not at a stage where we can rely on just pure data in the form of sort of in a warehouse. It's still going to be in you know, the electronic form of a paper document, essentially, for various reasons, partly evidential.
Okay, so what we're saying is our 1GI is a desirable beneficial, but won't be the whole solution. You'll still need paper. Is that
or it's electronic representation?
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So essentially,
that's a good point.
What we we've shifted in a world of storing things electronically, but it's the, you know, the equivalent of a filing case and you know, cabinet in the corner, isn't it?
Okay, just let's scroll down a bit. These are all points, by the way, that we didn't get much on in the last meeting. That's why we're doing them all over the place. Okay, let's look at soft landing approach. Design a comprehensive soft landing approach, including defining information scope, ownership, and processes for updating and managing information.
Does everybody know what soft landings is? Does anybody not know?
Ain't that.
Just expand on the term, that would be helpful, I think. Yeah. Maybe we need that in the document.
Yeah, soft landings was developed by BISRIA many years ago. And the principle, that's the Building Services Research and Information Association. And the principle was to overcome the problem where a building was handed over to the FM team and they didn't know how to run it. So the idea of soft landings is that the FM team is brought into the design and construction process much earlier, so that they are familiar with the building before it's handed over, and also have got the opportunity to contribute to making the design more suited to operation. Is that a reasonable description, Nick? Have I missed anything on that?
No, well, I think part of it is to make sure that there's a set of objectives, operational objectives, set up before design and construction starts, so that in the soft landing period, whether it's 3 years or 5 years, there's something to compare the actual performance of the asset against.
Yes.
That's the really big challenge, is to get people involved with commissioning buildings to say what it's meant to do in a way that is testable.
Yeah.
Jarek.
Yeah, just to add to this soft landing, using BIM and 3D design, whatever software that might be, it's quite good opportunity to provide this early engagement with the facilities, to walk them through the project, explain what's where, and maybe a little bit how it operates as well. You can build in scenarios from electrical point of view, switching scenarios, and explain them online. You don't have to be even in the building. Also, what I did before was involved in a project where at the end, or towards the end of the project, we invited the facility teams separately. There was many meetings. This was actually a project requirement, and we recorded everything like a video recording, which was professionally edited and then shared with the client, so they can do offline training with other new team members. But this is static; it's not live, but it is quite good.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Richard Bacon. You're on mute, Richard. But you're gesticulating beautifully.
Keep doing that. I've got a construction going on literally just outside this window, and I keep muting it so that you can't hear what's going on outside.
We can't hear it.
So I was going to say, I think with this document where we're talking about sort of like live building element, it's worth adding something on. It might well be further down. Apologies for not having read it. Is a soft takeoff approach, because obviously we're going to get to a point, in particular in the PFI world, where 25, 30, however many years down the line it is, you're looking to hand a building back to potentially a completely different operational team to take over all of the data that we've managed to keep live over whatever period of time it is from the building completion. So it might be worth putting that in somewhere, as well as the soft landing, that there's also at some point likely to be a soft takeoff approach needed as well.
Yeah, that's a good point for handover.
I think we could claim to have invented that. That's really
No,
make sure that one's properly minuted. Then, if it goes in a
Anybody else on soft landing? Okay, just let's scroll down a bit further.
Well, before we go off there, the next one down, live record of the building safety data. The point about that is that there are now dozens of different systems and sensors that different parties will have put into buildings, that some of which are live, some of which are recording information but are still electronically available, like fire door inspections and things like that. And all of that information needs to be feeding the safety management system, for the safety management system to reflect the current state of the most current information, because these different systems are great, but they're monitoring things in isolation, and they need to be pulled together.
Okay, right, Jess, do you want to scroll down? Yeah, no, scroll down to the next black.
So the blue ones, the ones that were added last week, are they? Or
The blue ones are added in the first meeting. Yeah, yeah. They're there. There was no point in really rewriting and messing around with everything with these meetings coming up, because we've added so much more.
Yeah.
As you can appreciate for this day. So they're just kind of a rough thing for me, actually, as much as anything else. Okay. George, you pick one.
Well, I think there's two there that jump out to me. There's 2B and 2C, both of which are the two elements of the process. One is having active asset information in, whichever systems are in place, and then the safety management system then being informed by that, and also recognizing that it's a safety management system, not a software platform in itself. The software platform is an important part of it, but you've got a lot of procedures and things that wrap around that.
Anybody else on this? Okay, scroll down a bit more. Okay, let's look at people. Okay, let's look at skill resources for physical and digital assets. Ensure skilled resources are available to manage both physical and digital assets, including personnel training, both traditional building management and digital data oversight. Okay.
I think that's very true, both in terms of people using the data and interpreting it, and using the systems and being informed. But one of the biggest challenges, I think, is getting people to provide their information in a form that then other people are going to be able to read and use. So it's both sides of that. Why is it important, for example, for people to keep a record of any changes they've made? That's a cultural thing as well as a technology thing.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. That's what Heidi was saying earlier, isn't it?
Hmm.
It's surprising how often that word cultural comes up, doesn't it? Usually in line, usually together with cultural shift, which is then followed by necessary.
Yeah.
Okay, scroll down a bit, Jez.
Well, the responsible persons bit there, Richard,
which ones?
Yeah, the digital platform for responsible persons.
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the most important elements in the whole process now, that the responsible person, which could be a person or an organization, they need to be aware of what their responsibilities are and how they need to be able to utilize the information.
What you're talking about, some sort of technical compliance dashboard somewhere that highlights all the things that any given building the responsible persons are responsible for, and whether they're suitably maintained, certified, etc.
Yeah.
Ed?
I was just wondering if it'd be sensible to change it to duty holders, given that responsible persons is connected to the fire safety order, Then we got accountable persons and principal accountable persons under the Building Safety Act, and then of course we'll have duty holders under other safety legislation as well. So
duty holders is the generic, is it then?
Yeah, I think that's a better generic term. You know, these are duty holders under legislation.
So do we change that?
I think probably add in duty holders under legislation.
Sorry.
So responsible person is an official title. Duty holders is a group of responsible titles. So duty holder, yeah, probably is the better one to use there, because a responsible person is just one of the many types of duty holder.
Right. Okay. So provide a digital platform for duty holders to review. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
That could be defined.
Can you make a note of that, please?
You could always define that with, you know, underneath saying duty holders covers RPs, APs, PAPs, etc. And then there's clarity there. And bearing in mind, in Scottish legislation, they'll use different terms in the Fire Scotland Act.
Of course.
Just make a note to do it on 3C. Responsible person to duty holder. Just put a note somewhere. You don't have to do it on the document. Just you make a note of it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Let's scroll down a little bit further.
Don't go too far. Sorry, just up a bit.
Up a bit, quick, just.
Bit more. Okay. That's something that's been hammered into me, that the holistic compliance approach, that the building needs to be considered as a system, and a lot of subsystems or groupings of things that are performing together, rather than, you know, for example, just doing fire door inspections. So I think that's an important element. Does anybody have a view on that?
I'd completely agree. It has to be holistic, because there's so many factors that affect other factors. You know, one component will affect another, and I think it has to be. And I think with the culture as well, it's a big step change required.
Andy.
Yeah, just on that, I mean, George has just mentioned fire doors again. One of the biggest issues with fire doors is we get an instruction to maintain or inspect fire doors. I don't think maintenance is the right word. So we get an instruction to inspect fire doors. On the first occasion we go to site, we set the asset register up based on the information that we're given by the client. The client very rarely has that asset information to hand of the structural components, the compliance of the fire doors. But we can inspect and maintain fire doors as per the required recommended standards and by the manufacturer's recommendations. But having a piece of wood in a hole is worse than useless if the compartmentation between the fire door and the stud is not there. So the actual inspection should be, for fire doors, at least once should be incorporated with a compartmentation review for the installation of the doors, not just for the mechanical operation of the doors and the license. It's all right having a 30-minute door in a 30-minute wall, but if that wall is less than satisfactory, then the door's worse than useless.
Absolutely.
Anyone else on that point? Okay, I like this one. Awareness of unintended consequences. Be aware of unintended and intended consequences and the reliability of data for building safety. Regular evaluations and reviews help identify and address any unintended consequences that may arise. Right, okay.
Interesting to track down who gave. Would you have a record of where that came from?
Yeah, we would. I've no idea where that came from. Actually, I'm kind of like, oh, okay. Yeah, no idea. That would be, it'd be like 10 stages ago, George.
Yeah, sorry.
Andy.
Would that come down to say we maintaining fire alarm systems, and you've got your 10-year life cycle as issued by most manufacturers? So an unintended consequence of not replacing that detector could leave you vulnerable if the detector doesn't operate as designed. Is that what this means?
Well, that would be an example, wouldn't it? Ed?
It's just a couple of things. I suspect this may have come from Will Franks from Adelard. These look very much like their realm of, really? Around systems and safety, and I can sort of recognise the DNA there. I'm not saying definitely, but that might be someone to pursue that aspect with, or go to Adelard. I'm sure they would be willing to input. And yeah, I mean, the awareness of unintended consequences. This is where again your change management processes come into play, because it's ensuring when you have changes in the building that you consult the right people. So one of the unintended consequences of, say, removing flammable cladding is you expose the combustible elements whilst you're removing it. So actually your risk goes up when your building's got a scaffold around it with timber planks and you've got people working around the building. So how do you manage that unintended consequence of raising the risk? So there's that. I think it may well be aimed at that. It's multifaceted, that term, and I think these ones could be expanded a bit more just to explain exactly what that means, because for the uninitiated you could just gloss that, read over that and go, that's nice, not sure what it means though.
Well, it's having two focus of view, isn't it? You install something to do something, but don't look at what effect it has on other things. That comes again down to the holistic approach, doesn't it?
Yeah, we put door closers on doors, and then wheelchair users struggle to get through them.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then they can't escape in the event of a fire. Or the pressurization system that stops the doors opening. We go on and on and on.
That's exactly it, isn't it? Absolutely. Abdullah.
You promote the wrong person, and suddenly you've got no one to do your responsible person.
Actually, sorry, it was Shakira.
So actually, picking up on Edward's point, I was going to bring in a few things that came to my mind, and one was more with regards to the unintended consequences of things being used perhaps in a way that it wasn't intended from the design. So, for instance, Grenfell, the fridge was, a faulty appliance or potentially wasn't used in a particular way. So there's that. There's also, in terms of management, again, if certain equipment that are installed aren't again kind of used in a particular way. Another thing that came to mind again is the opportunity of being able to kind of simulate and almost like prepare for some future potential risks and consequences of certain actions, which again requires reliable and quality sort of live data. So having almost that dynamic asset model that also kind of contributes behavioral elements, I think really sort of speaks to this part.
Yeah, it's because it's also human reaction to certain circumstances, isn't it? Which you can't always predict, predict.
Absolutely.
Abdullah.
I think what I wanted to say was just in line with what Shakira just mentioned. The one that came to my mind was I think last year, a car park collapse in the US, where they attributed it to the increasing weight of the average car being much heavier with EVs and all that. So that's unintended. And I think in line with that, after 9/11, how many structures considered air crashes and all, maybe extreme cases, but having that ability to simulate your existing asset for future scenarios, I think will be key, because unknowns that are bound to come up.
Yeah, if we all go to electric vehicles with the heavy batteries, they'll have to rebuild all the bridges.
Don't do it, I did.
Okay, right, we've just got a couple of minutes left. Anybody want to make a comment about anything they like?
Heidi, have you, I know Ed's doing safety case reports for Origin. Have you had safety case reports done?
Yes. I'm predominant at the moment. I'm not on the new development side. I've been involved in our existing stock, and we've just had feedback from the regulator as early adopters. And I'll be honest, it's like wading through thick pea soup. We put our case together, and then we've had feedback from the assessors. We've then sat in front of the regulator who disagree with their own assessors. So without speaking out of turn, you can imagine that's very, very difficult because there's no blueprint as such. So yes, we have had the building safety case, and we're currently doing one on one of our new build. So that'll be very interesting. Yeah, it is very concerning because obviously I'm responsible and trying to get a handle on all of that. And I was just listening as well around that understanding about the consequences, because for instance, e-bikes is a classic at the moment. You've got scooters and e-bikes, and we've got operational teams putting storage in the building, whereas in reality, if they could just build it outside if there's possible, or think about the construction of what that needs to be, because the potential for fire is actually quite high risk, isn't it, with these batteries? So it's that was what came to mind when people were talking. So yeah, it's very, very difficult. We've got 56,000 properties with Anchor, and they're national, and a lot are run by location managers who don't have that technical knowledge. So trying to make sure people understand roles and responsibilities is going to be key, I think.
Yeah. Okay, anybody else?
Andy's got his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Andy, I didn't see.
Sorry, that was from before, but one of the things that we find sort of from a management perspective is the lack of awareness of our clients of what is actually required to manage and maintain assets. So the arguments that we have going across the board, if you take BS 8214, they've changed the specification where it used to say fire doors should be maintained in a minimally of 6 months. It's now down to risk assessment. But who is going to do that risk assessment? Our technicians are trained to maintain or inspect the fire doors, and not there, and they're not qualified to risk rate how often that door should be maintained. The client has got no awareness of that either. So you're left in limbo, and who's competent, who is classed as a competent person, who's responsible for that? So you've got a door that's used 1,000 times a day on 300 days a year. That's 300,000 uses. Those hinges are tested for 100,000 uses. Does that mean we have to replace the hinges 3 times a year? And how do we tell the client what the client is ultimately responsible? But the way the standards are reading, they've gone more grey and less prescriptive. So it is making it more difficult for the clients to understand what they're responsible for.
That's that's a really interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, guys, we've come to the end of the marathon. Those who stood the course and did all 4 meetings, your certificate is in the post. For everybody else, thank you very much. It's been an amazing day, and each meeting on its own right has been fantastic. So thank you very much, and we'll see you all again soon, I'm sure, and I hope, and we'll get the High Point document, this document as far as it is, and a video link over to you sometime next week. Other than that, have a good evening.
Thanks for
Thank you very
inviting us,
much.
Ollie.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.